Hello, we are here with Matt Washford today on the Partner Perspective for our next installment. Pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to get you straight into this podcast. So,
Brilliant.
Give me an introduction. Who are you? And give me a brief about your background.
Yeah, so Matt Washford, I'm a managing director at CFGI in our London office. Started my career in Kansas City in 2013 in external audit at the Big Four. Had a very, very fortunate opportunity to move to Sydney, Australia for a few years and work on clients over there in external audit. Decided that I didn't like being the guy that clients were like, oh God, Matt's here. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Everyone hide. And wanted to move into assisting companies kind of comply with controls requirements, SOX requirements, things like that. So I interviewed with a company in the UK, fell in love with the opportunity, and have been here for just over 5 years now. And moved to CFGI a year and a half ago from the Big Four in consulting and leading our risk advisory practice at CFGI in London.
Sounds amazing. Also, Sydney, I was there for a while. I was supposed to be there for forever. I went out and I was like, right, guys, I'm leaving. I'm relocating. 6 months later, I came back to my mom's house. And I was like, I'm back, Mum.
Yeah, everyone says, how could you possibly leave Sydney's weather to come to London? It was like, you know what, it was probably a bit too hot for me in Sydney.
Was it?
Too hot. I like the cool, the nice spring weather, and the summers in Sydney were just absolutely brutal.
It's fresh, isn't it?
It is, but I love the beaches. The rock beaches here don't do it for me quite as much as
it's true. I get miserable. So when I was in Turkey recently, I went to the beach and it was a pebble beach. And it just grates me the wrong way. It just really, really grates on me. I do not like that. I'm like, where's the sand? I thought it was a sandy beach. I was in the wrong part of Turkey, clearly.
Right.
So, yeah, definitely with you on that. Talk to me about, before we go into sort of CFGI and who they are, because a lot of people might not know who they are. Yeah. So talk to me about sort of your hobbies. Who are you outside of being an MD for CFGI?
Yeah, I've got a lovely wife at home now. We've been married for almost a year now, coming up on it.
Yeah.
A puppy, well, kind of pseudo puppy now that we're taking care of. So he's a year and a half. He's a Bernedoodle, and he was like a poster child for cutest puppy on the face of the planet. So do a lot with him, a lot of dog walks, very active on the weekends. But I'm probably a bit off the typical partner hobby route with I really, really enjoy strategy video games. So spend a lot of time in evenings, weekends, to probably my wife's dismay, that glued to a computer when I'm away from work, even, because trying to keep my mind active and engaged and kind of working to work out problems and strategy in that way. So
I love that, because I don't hear often that people are into that. And when you told me, I was like, right, we've got to talk about that. Favorite video game, or then we're not promoting it, but favorite video game?
Currently, I play a lot of, it's called Hearthstone.
Okay.
So they're called auto chess games, where you kind of take turns intermittently, set up a board, and then you'll fight against another opponent's board. So you have to choose kind of what pieces or cards you're laying down depending on what your opponent has, and trying to play around them, read what they're going to do next.
So it's strategic.
It is strategic, yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so when I imagine video games, I'm talking about car games, and I am terrible at that. Yeah. So very different.
Can't do that. I used to play the action ones. My actions per minute is what they call it. Isn't quite what it used to be when I was 18 years old. So I like the games that let me take a minute, think, and then make a turn, make an action.
Taste is matured.
That's it. I don't know about mature. They're not as popular for sure, but I enjoy them. And it gets my mind off of work for a bit, focusing on something else, but still active and engaged, which I
think people have to find what works for them, outside of work. Whatever we always talk about de-stressing, or how do you, because at work, any job is intense, right? No matter what you do, there's always challenges, there's always stresses people will always have. And I think people need to find what de-stresses them and what works and what do they enjoy.
Yeah.
That's really important. Even if it's knitting. I mean, I was saying to someone, I really want to try knitting. And they actually laughed, because they're like, what? And I was like, I'd love to do it one day.
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet, absolutely not. But I'd like to one day. But I think it's just trying different things is probably the point that I'm trying to make, and see what works for somebody, whatever that might be.
Yeah, 100%. I've got friends that run, and they can run for hours on end, and they say it's just mind-numbing. They don't think, they're just going. And I wish that was my hobby that distressed me. It'd be a lot healthier than video games. But, everyone does have a different thing that helps them take a break, unwind, get your mind off of it for a bit. Because if you're thinking work 24/7, you're never going to be as efficient as you can be.
No, absolutely true. And it goes back to sort of taking regular breaks as well. It's just being what is good for you and just knowing your body no matter, what that looks like as well, isn't it? So,
and do you shut down like on holidays? Like, are you one of the laptop down, emails down, I'm not checking anything, or do you get more comfort out of knowing that things are up to date? Yeah,
100%. So I'm definitely this type of person where if somebody says shut your laptop off, don't check your emails, that will make me definitely more stressed out than if I was just to check it.
Yeah.
Even if it's just once a day, even though I'm on holiday, and it's not because somebody's telling me to do it. My boss doesn't sit here and tell me to do that. I do it because I want to do it, because I know it'll put me at ease throughout the whole week that I'm off, and also when I get back on the Monday back to work, right?
I'm 100% the same. So I used to shut down completely, and then as you progress in your career, you're on a few more accounts, a few more moving parts. And I said, I'd much rather have an inbox that's smaller that I know I need to action on Monday, rather than come back to a lot more that I know I can ignore, not action, because I've stayed up to date with it, and I can delete that because they've responded to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the flip side, some people do work by just switching off and going sort of completely MIA, right? Yeah. So again, it's just whatever works for that person, isn't it? And for me, definitely, I have a habit. I mean, Julia, my colleague, texts me. She's like, "Get off your emails," and I'm like, "No, I like it.
I need to be on them. It helps me. I will enjoy my vacation if I just clear this email."
Exactly. Even though it's by the pool in 40 degrees heat in Turkey, I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about CFGI. Who are they on the market? And two-prong question: what made you move there?
Sure. So CFGI is a US-based company. So we started in Boston. We've now got offices, I think there's 17 in the US, one in London. We've got an office in Birmingham, an office in Cambridge, recently an office in Singapore. And in the news, we've recently acquired a German-based company as well, PAS. So very much getting to that global, if not already, I'd call us a global international firm, but growing and expanding across the world. So we've got just over 1,000 employees, which has probably grown now with the acquisition of PAS and the opening in Singapore. Focusing on, we call ourselves the Office of the CFO. So if you think of anything a CFO might want to buy, transactional advisory services, accounting advice, just having someone in a chair to help them push them through a financial close process, or audit assist. And then what we do as well, controls work, cyber, you name it. I think what's unique about us is we don't have an external audit branch. So all of the independence barriers that may inhibit other service providers from getting into the weeds and acting as an extension of management and really getting their hands dirty versus providing advice and consult. We can kind of do the advice consult and then say, hey, by the way, if you need hands and feet to help you out with that, we don't have to worry about the independence barrier, so we can get in and do the dirty work as well. Yeah.
Would you say you're a lot more hands-on with clients to some degree? Do you think that's a fair judgment for me to make? Or?
Yeah, 100%. And I would say even scaling up through like senior levels as well, right? So as a managing director, 8 months ago, I was detail reviewing process flows and sitting in walkthrough meetings where I think even in like external audit at the Big Four, you get seniors or consultants kind of leading those, the documentation review will get up to director, partner level and things like that, but they're not embedded as much as we are in the detail, in the weeds of the process, which I actually really enjoy. I love problem solving, understanding where the issue is, and then trying to come up with routes of different solutions from high complexity, but really high returns, all the way down to let's just put the Band-Aid on it and get you across the line for this year. And without sitting in those conversations, you don't necessarily have the same level of insight, do you?
Yeah.
So I very much enjoy that. And I would say we're a bit more hands-on and can get more hands-on because of that.
Yeah. So it's just interesting. So when you're talking about sort of getting in there and understanding what the problem is and trying to solve that problem, you almost glow when you're talking about that. That's just a judgment from sitting over here. What is it about that? Is there some sort of like, is it the reward at the end that you've sort of done a good job with that and solved that issue, or is it the analytical and the the decisions you need to make along the way. What is it about that you like? Because you're absolutely glowing when you're talking about all of this.
I think it's probably twofold. So the first is when it comes to controls and compliance and risk and all of the buzzwords that finance professionals are worried about, operational efficiency and closing the books, they're not necessarily as concerned about the SOX side and the compliance side, other than we don't want to get dinged and we don't want deficiencies in the audit. I enjoy the analytical side of it in trying to say, right, the answer in front of me says this, but the client's not going to love that because it means more bodies or more heads or more time. Is there a different way that we can think about risk and how we still solve the issue without necessarily going down the path that's most followed? So I like putting my mind to work in that way. But twofold, I love coaching people, bringing them along the journey, upskilling individuals in areas that they necessarily may not be thinking about things in a certain way. So when it comes to controls and process and what people are doing in their day-to-day job, a lot of individuals know what they're doing and how to do it. They don't necessarily understand why they're doing it and why it's important and what it means for them and their teams and the organization. So helping them understand that this might be an extra 2 hours in your day, but it means this for you, and it de-risks, this process by X amount, and it increases trust and transparency in your financials, just all the benefits that you can gain from it. And then if an auditor comes and asks some questions, they don't just say, oh, well, CFGI told me to do that. They really understand why we've told them that this is an important step, and they can articulate it in a clear way, which makes me feel good at night. I like learning too. So, everyone growing together and, being seen as driving value in an organization when most people see compliance as a cost function.
Yeah, 100%. I completely get that. I think other people who are listening to this will definitely resonate with that. You talked about two different elements there about sort of, using your mind, but then also understanding people and helping people understand, and connecting the sort of dots. That would be IQ, EQ, right? And having a balance between the two. What kind of qualities do people in governance need, do you think, if someone wanted to get into this profession?
Sure.
And if you could influence somebody today who wants to stay in this area or go into controls, SOX control, whatever that might look like, risk, rather than go down a finance route? Because a lot of the candidates that I speak to have done audit. You did external audit, right? Many years ago. Traditionally, sort of, I see a lot of people go down the internal audit, internal controls route, but I'm speaking to a lot of candidates who don't want to do that anymore. They see finance as being quite sexy. If you could give, that person an idea around what qualities it takes to go down this route, what would those be?
Yeah, and I think external audit's a great starting point, because at the heart of what I do, at least, which is controls compliance, SOX, UKCR, you need to understand risk inherently, right? So completeness, accuracy, valuation, etc. Once you understand the risks around a certain process and account, the IQ side of it is kind of taken care of, right? And then you start thinking about, I'm not a very creative person, I'm not great with PowerPoint, but creative solutioning around, right, I understand that I'm worried about existence of revenue transactions and the what could go wrongs, or, the process areas where something might go amiss. How am I doing things to mitigate that? How can it be done? How can it be done differently? So the IQ side of it kind of takes care of itself once you know the basics and a bit of training on standards and what's done practically in the industry. That being said, we always look for ways to improve it, grow on it. We don't want to use the same processing controls that we did 20 years ago. They're becoming antiquated.
Outdated.
So we like people, creative thinking mindsets, but that truly understand risk and control and objectives at the end of it. I would say the biggest difference for me when I made the jump from external audit to consulting was the EQ side of it, right? And I know that when it comes to big companies, they've got 4 options, major options for external auditors, and then you've got the mid-tiers after that, depending on the size and the brand that they want stamped to their financial statements. But at the heart of it, at consulting, they've got, I don't know how many options, 30, 40, 50 across the UK, probably depending on what service they're looking for. So when it comes down to it, it's about the way that you work, the way that you communicate it, the way that you go about managing budgets, managing relationships, getting the most out of your people internally, but also managements, individuals that you're working with. So it all comes down to feedback. And if you go and provide an excellent service and the client really enjoyed working with you, they're going to be a repeat client.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go out and you have that external audit mindset of this is wrong,
Yeah.
you need to change this, etc., rather than a problem solving and solutioning mindset, it'll be a bit more challenging. So I'd say at the heart of it, it's a bit of the IQ side and understanding, but more so owning relationships, making sure that a client has a great experience working with you and you get to a good solution.
Yeah, and some people that I've spoken to absolutely love the relationship and client, sort of the client side and building it and really understanding people. And others that I've spoken to just don't. That scares them almost.
Yeah.
Was there a time where could you relate to that? Were you always a people person and you liked building relationships, or was there a time in your career where you really had to work on that?
Yeah, I'm very introverted at the heart of who I am. Video games, sitting at home, I enjoy that a lot. And I'm not. I love events and meeting people and networking and getting to grow and learn issues at clients. But if you stuck me at a networking event where I know absolutely no one, I'm not going to be the bubbly individual that walks around to a bunch of different groups and hey, I'm Matt. It's just not who I am intrinsically. But I've always enjoyed the people side and the relationship side of the business. So I was making speeches at, year 10. So what was that, like 15, 16 years old to 500 people at a youth Senate event that we had growing up. So always been a bit, fluent and confident in front of people and audiences, but not how I would prefer to spend my time.
Yeah.
I did have probably like the two eye-opening things to me when it came to client service. One, as a staff one at EY, I had a client tell me, as an external auditor, if you come in and don't have issues in our audit or really valid value-add management letter points, we have paid for a non-value add service for you. And it just kind of made me take a step back and breathe. And I was like, that's really intense for a 22-year-old out of
it's quite deep.
To hear. And then another one in Sydney with a client where the CFO, we were just supposed to sign in 2 days and had issues. And you could just see the hot-headedness, the irritation with the audit process and what was going on. You kind of get exposure to that as you move on. And I think where I got to with it was you see frustrations, escalations, you get emotions involved when it comes to providing services, buying services, et cetera, and decision-making overall. And working to try to de-escalate that and work on, right, I understand you're upset about X. Let's take it back to what we did here, what led to that, and how we fix it moving forward rather than dally on, the past and what's happened. So
really interesting. Although I can't think of anything worse than doing a speech in front of 500 people in year 10. Like
I think at the time it didn't really hit me, right?
Yeah.
So it was just like it was called Youth Congress. So we had Youth Congress and Youth Court, like our branches of government, and it was a chance to volunteer and get involved from a young age. And I was really involved with the organization. They said, would you mind going up and giving the opening introduction? It was only 2 minutes and basically a welcome all of you from different schools. We're here to, try to brainstorm and solve problems that'll make our community a better place. So very scripted, but got up, did it, kind of sat down, saw a video afterwards, and I was like, that wasn't too bad. And they're like,
bad. Good shot.
I would have been shaking so hard. And I was like, I didn't think about that. I probably would be if I would have thought about it beforehand.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience. And again, helped me kind of get to where I am today and being able to be confident in front of people and microphones.
I think so. I think there's a fine balance, isn't there, of we were talking about this earlier about remaining authentic. And there's that helped you, that scenario, you were still authentic. Like there were elements of, okay, you weren't comfortable at that point, but that supported you, that helped you.
Absolutely.
But there's authenticity where, someone might go into work and completely have to change who they are because there's a certain persona that they might want to portray. Yeah. Have you ever seen that, experienced that? Do you think that's, I've never met anyone in that position because I would think it would unravel quite quickly. But have you ever seen that happen?
Yeah, it's occurred definitely in the past. And there's been situations. I think everyone has a point in their career where, something comes up with a client deliverable or an issue in the audit or something, and you've got to communicate, bad news, poor news, whatever it might be. And, especially when you're younger in your career, there may be coaching and direction on how to do it, things to say, things to avoid, et cetera, et cetera. So at times I felt like I've probably said too much to clients, which is my downfall. I am an open book. Absolutely. And everyone that's worked with me in the past, hopefully, will tell you that where you stand with me 100% of the time. You get 100% of me. I'm going to give you all the coaching and training and feedback that you want, but it's up to you to be receptive to it, take it, ask questions, et cetera.
I mean, I completely understand, because when I speak to my clients, I mean, the colleagues in the office, I've been very honest with my clients, very blunt. And I come off that call and I do sort of check myself and say, was that a bit too blunt? But my clients really, really, because they see it's authentically me and because I'm trying to be myself, they understand I am having these questions, I'm posing these questions, and I'm giving honest feedback about the market because I am trying to support their process and I'm trying to support their growth plans. And I don't think if somebody's not authentically themselves, then that will come to light. If somebody has to feel like they have to be blunt and they're putting that on, that will unravel as well. So it's just having a fine balance on those things, isn't it?
And I think it's so important in both of our career paths, right? For recruiting and in consulting. Authenticity shouldn't be a differentiator. It really is. And whether you're working with, I've worked with many recruiters in the past when I was younger in my career and going through the motion of, do I want to stay? Do I want to go? And you could tell the ones that were in it to put you in a role and just find a way to get you in and out of the pipeline and push you through and take, what they get. And then you can tell the ones like yourself who work with individuals, understand their needs, their passion, where they're going to fit well, and find the right roles for them. It's very similar to consulting, where there's partners that, you can tell are pushing pipeline and growth and new sales and new business versus individuals who are working with clients to say, look, I'm not here to sell you anything. I want to ask you the question, what's going on in your business? Great. Is there anything that we can help with? How's that going? In hand? Excellent. Give me a call next quarter and we'll see if there's anything going on. And I think clients, whether it be someone who's going through the recruitment process or someone who's buying services from consulting, really appreciate not being pushed, rather being asked and then tried to challenge it.
Absolutely. It's so true, isn't that? I mean, I've worked, seen other recruiters, and there's such a thing about recruiters as well, because a lot of them are pushy. They think they have to be a certain way. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair on anyone. There are candidates that I've spoken to on the market, and they've called me to say, I want to move. And I've actually turned around and said, I don't think you should. Now, as a recruiter, that goes against what I do. But actually, it's the right thing for that person, because they will ruin their career if they do jump around. I've been honest with candidates to say, if you're going to move every year and a half, that's not, where's your loyalty? And people will question that. So I think that's really important. Talk to me about a time where, have you had a good recruiting experience? Did you have a negative one? What are your thoughts on recruiters?
I think you can have brilliant recruiting experiences depending on who you're working with. I would say one of the first couple that I worked with, or probably the first couple that I worked with, it was very much, here's a role, do you want to interview for it? And it was like, that's not really what I'm looking for. And they're like, just get in and talk to them. You're going to love them. You're going to love them. And hindsight being 2020 is like, oh, well, I said I didn't like it. I probably shouldn't have. But I have worked with one recruiter in the past when I was debating moving back to the States versus moving over here, who every role that seemed to trickle in that I was like, I'm just not quite sure that's what I want to do. That's a bit more on the finance side, like you were talking about, people wanting to go there. And I said, I just don't see myself in a month-end process. I don't want every working day 0 to 7 to be the same each month. I want it to be different. I like spontaneity. And that recruiter actually really got me and was like, right, well, I've got nothing on my desk right now for it. They're all finance roles.
Honesty,
and
I like that.
And I was like, I really appreciate that, rather than have me interview for a role that might have 15% of what I'm looking for. Just say, look, we don't have anything. It might be best to reach out to them, or we'll be in touch if you need anything. And it enabled trust in them a lot more too, to know that, I can go to them if I ever wanted to. I don't think I'll go back to the States, but if I ever wanted to, they'd be the first person I reach out to, right? Because
absolutely.
I know them, I trust them, and I know that they're going to do right by them.
It takes time to get to know someone. Recruiting and getting to know someone on the market is not a short-term thing. To really understand one's career, it takes time, and to understand what motivates them and what their push and pulls are.
Yeah.
You know, what drives them and what makes them tick. It takes a while. There's people on the market who I spoke to someone last week. I've known her from my first year in recruiting, and I placed her in that role, and she's a director now. And it was so nice to catch up with her because we've both grown over the 8 years. And I think that's what recruiting is about, you know, if you are in it for the long game.
Yeah.
Going back to your profile and your move, so just digging into your sort of Big Four background and moving to CFGI, what not specifically CFGI, but why should anyone move from a Big Four to a smaller firm? Reason I ask that is that has been the trend over the last 2-3 years.
Yeah.
From your experience, why should anyone make that move?
Well, I can say why I made the move, first of all. Because I won't say this is general advice to anyone out there. It's all down to personal preference. Yeah. But I would say to a certain extent, in my last 12 months at the Big Four, I did a lot of work on internal consultations, on independence work, and internal memos on why we could or couldn't provide a service. A lot of client relationship, side of it, and I really enjoyed it, and it helped me grow immensely, right? But I missed the technical side of things. I missed getting into the weeds. A project came up where I was, embedded in bank reconciliations, and for the first time within months, I was like, wow, I really enjoy being in the detail and talking to, AP clerks or, treasury assistants, trying to work through and solutionize with them. So I think at the Big Four, as you progress through your career, and external audit may be a bit separate, but especially on the consulting side, there's more expectation to be on the business development side, be in the market, be bringing in business. And whilst I enjoy that, and that is part of my role at CFGI, in the interview, they specifically said, you're going to be expected to get your hands dirty. We have utilization targets for MDs, for partners, that we want you to be client facing and solving problems. And probably one of the things when I interview candidates and let them know when they're coming from consulting in the Big Four is you're going to be expected to...
I bet that was music to your ears as well. You were like, yes!
That's probably one of the ears perk up a bit, and it's like, wow, I get to get back in the weeds and the details. So that was probably one of the selling points. And I'd just say, opportunity-wise, when I left the Big Four, I definitely thought that I was a lifer. I definitely thought that saw myself as partner there long term. But the opportunity at CFGI, when I first interviewed with Mark, who's one of our recruiting partners, he said, we're looking to you to come in and build out our risk advisory practice. And to me, I think at the time I was 33, I have the opportunity to build something in the UK from the ground up with a stable branch in the US that I can use as guidance and support. I get to instill the culture and the way of going about doing business, the way about interacting with clients, the way about handling internal things, how I want to, and set the tone within our department. Albeit with the tone at the top of Greg, who's our managing partner, who, after I interviewed with him, I said, we see business the same way, we see client relationships the same way. This is where I want to go and build out and hopefully, build a brand and a career at CFGI in London that people look back in 5-10 years time and say, wow, that's a really great risk advisory practice in London. And you can put your hand up and say, that was partially me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's adding value, isn't it? It's, that would have been a challenge for you. That's not an easy move to make. You would have seen that as, yes, a challenge, but also something that, not only sort of a challenge physically or trying to implement that, but mentally, I think that's where, moves like that are stimulating for a lot of people. They're like, I know this is going to not only be, this isn't a 1-year move here. This is 5 to 10 years, similar to what you said. You want to add value where people look back on that and you're like, yeah, I was a part of that.
Yeah.
That's why I made that move.
And I think it was a lot easier for me with CFGI in particular because we're backed by 2 of the bigger PE houses globally. We're backed by a parent firm in the US that has 1,000 employees. So it wasn't coming into, I think I was employee 9 or 10 at the time in April of last year, and saying, oh God, what are we going to do? You have resources to lean on, and you have support to make sure that you're growing, in a stable way, and that you're doing the right things. You have people to bounce ideas off of and everything like that. So it didn't feel like it was the same, I'm leaving for a brand new startup. Oh my God, what's going to happen? It was like, I'm leaving for a new firm in London or a new office in London, but we still have kind of that backdrop of support that you can.
That's a really important point you make, because again, I think when I'm speaking to a lot of people, when I work with the full suite from Big Four to smaller boutique consulting firms. I think a lot of people think, oh, they're not going to have the resources. They're not going to have support. Oh, I'm on my own. The point is, you're right. You're not on your own. There are resources. They're not just a firm where you're setting up on your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a very, very true point.
It's important to remember that too, that like I love the entrepreneurial mindset. I could never do it on my own and build out something from the ground up and think about everything that needs to be thought about in starting a brand new company. But even if you are doing that, you've got a network of experience. And I have individuals from, my previous employer that still reach out and want guidance and support, or just have questions on what are you seeing and doing about this and how are you tackling this with clients. And whilst you don't necessarily share answers and give away IP and stuff, we're trying to problem solve together and make the profession a better place and a more accommodating place.
It's networking, isn't it? And I think a lot of people think, if I talk to that person now, am I sharing trade secrets? You're not. Yeah. Chances are they would have gone through a challenge that you potentially are going through, and they can offer you advice and vice versa. Yeah. It's just supporting each other, because the audit profession, let's be honest, it's not that big.
Yeah.
There's a candidate shortage market, and I think we need to help each other where, and add value to the profession itself, which is one of the reasons why I love doing this, and to share knowledge.
I think it's starting to break down those barriers and, won't call it antiquated ways of thinking, but the old way of consulting of, we're in our silo, we're going to do our own thing, and we keep this here. Instead, it's, look, we can probably broaden out, and the more transparent and authentic we are with each other in sharing information and struggles and solutions, the better solution that we're going to have overall moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. Also on that point, I think people need to back themselves more.
Yeah.
When they are moving to a smaller firm, and yes, I completely get it's a risk. Any role you're moving to, when you move jobs, it is a risk, right? I always used to ask my boss when I first started 8 years ago, I've never done recruitment before. Are you taking a big risk with me? And he was like, well, anyone's a risk.
Yeah.
So true. And it's the people that back themselves. Yes, you might not have the answers to everything, but if you've got that knack to go and speak to people, research, you can problem solve.
Yeah. And I guess two thoughts on that point. One, it's a risk to go, but there's a risk to staying as well.
Yeah,
right?
true.
And
Fair point.
there's redundancies, there's divisional shifts, there's mergers, acquisitions, disposal. So you never know what's going to happen in your current situation anyways. Even if you're at a Big Four or a smaller firm, you have no idea if growth's going to maintain, if the market's going to stay, or what might happen. So that was where my mindset was as well when I left, was, well, there was uncertainty around, certain things going on at firm restructuring. What's going to happen? Where will I land? What side of it will I be on? So one, there's no such thing as like stability 100% in consulting and professional services. And two, I agree with your point 100%. Back yourself and have confidence. If you're moving firm to firm, Big Four to Big Four, Big Four to small tier, mid tier, whatever it is, you're making that move for a reason. And you're choosing, especially if you're going to a smaller tier firm, to say, I believe in myself, my abilities, and what I can bring to the table for my clients and teams. Don't second guess that, right? Take it confidently, walk in on day one with a first step and a smile on your face, and be ready 100%. To bring yourself to the...
I think that was really nicely put. Any pivotal moments in your career? Have you had a moment that just really, I can probably think back to a few, especially in recruitment. Sometimes it's so hard, but have you had any sort of absolute challenges where you're like, I'm not sure if I could do this? Or actually any pivotal moments that were positive?
I'll think about the consulting pivotal moment. in external audit, my pivotal moment was getting a ding in an Australian regulator equivalent review for like a 1980s or 1990s law from Africa that we hadn't considered in our audit. And I kind of said, this is becoming such a tick box exercise to find issues in what we have and haven't tackled, and all these things, rather than truly coming in and trying to provide a value-based audit for clients and the market, right? I spent so much time on a form that we already filled out online, and it was a live form. It just needed to go into an audit file that was, have you checked all these boxes? So at that point in time, I said, I really do feel non-value add at times in external audit based on what I was doing internally. So that was my move to consulting. I would say there was one particular time in consulting where it was challenging for me, because it felt like the client knew they wanted a service and they knew they wanted to get to this end goal, but the steps required to get there, whilst defined and being talked about, it was like, right, I want to get from A to B. I don't care how you get there and what route you take.
Yeah.
But I want progress on how you're getting there.
Yeah.
And it felt like every roadblock and every time we tried to explain something, it was just like, well, make progress. Why aren't we making progress? And you try to get there. And I think at that point I said, wow, if I can't get people buying into what we're trying to achieve, even when the CEOs are saying we need to get to this end goal, am I influential enough in this profession to, get buy-in, to drive change, to really be able to do it?
Wow.
So it did have me second guessing, but at the same time, I think that's where I put down a list of pros and cons and started thinking about a 7 working day job that was the same over and over, or head of internal audit at one client where I do the same 40 audits a year and do X, Y, Z. And I said, I kind of like the challenge. And whilst you might not be able to cross every roadblock, when you do get across certain ones or bigger ones, you get home that night and pour yourself a glass of wine on a Friday with your steak and say,
now I know what you do on a Friday.
We really, really did something and achieved something this go around. And that feel good is kind of what kept me coming back for more. Yeah,
I think that's so well answered, because I think everyone goes through challenges. I think right now, me specifically, I feel, I've got such a weight on my shoulders, and, the economy and the elections. And I think a lot of people might be feeling like that as well. I definitely know I'm not on my own. And you do sort of start to think, okay, am I doing the right things? You almost do second guess yourself. And I think it's really important for you to just, I think that was really nice to be honest and raw about, the challenges you faced in your career along the way, because it's been a ride upwards, hasn't it? And that just looks different sometimes, not just linear.
I'd tell people, think about and reflect on the challenges and reflect on the hardships and what you do and you don't like about, your current role, but then reflect on the positives more so. And remember all the things that you've achieved, or, take a look back on helping a team member grow or learn a new skill, or a client solve an issue, whatever it might be. If you're going through, a troubling week or a really difficult, close or deadline, push through it, you get there, and then you say, right, let me reflect on, I know that wasn't a great experience and I didn't like it, but before being radical and deciding to make a big move or whatever, sit down, think about it, internalize it. And if your answer is still, I don't like those hardships, or there's too many of them and I don't get the benefits, then, at least you know that you've internalized it, rather than, especially when I was younger in the profession, I think at times some of the frustrations just get to you and you're like, God, this is terrible. Why am I still doing this? And I'm not getting anything out of this. And then, busy season ends, and 2 weeks later you're having a Friday pub lunch with friends and you're like, oh, this is why I do it.
This is it.
Still great. Yeah.
There's always a silver lining, isn't there?
There is.
Have you ever had, there's a lot of people that I speak to in the market, and I speak to them about mentoring, because in my opinion, I think it's really important.
Yep.
Have you ever had a mentor? Did you have anyone where you can go to and just ask for advice, or someone that played a pivotal or just really important role in your career?
Yeah, I'd say I have a couple of mentors now who are very independent from where I sit. Sometimes I just use them as a venting sounding board to be like, I have this frustration, I'm not getting anywhere. Am I tackling this the right way? Am I thinking about stuff the right way? And sometimes I use them as a career mentor, especially on my move to CFGI, saying, do you think I'm making the right move here? Is this something that, am I going too far in one direction from, big four, good growth, showing promising results and kind of on a trajectory to partner in X years versus kind of restarting at a new spot, needing to rebuild my brand and prove myself. And I think overwhelmingly, they didn't give me an answer, yes or no, right? They didn't say, take it or don't take it, but they said, think about the positives that you're gaining from it and what your frustrations are with your current role versus what the new role brings. And then decide at the end of the day, to your point, whether you back yourself in moving to a new role, a smaller firm. Are you going to be able to re-credentialize yourself? Are you going to be able to land well there, and are you a great cultural fit? And it helped guide my decision ultimately to what I think was the right decision, and to the decision that I made.
Yeah, I think that's really key, isn't it? Mentors don't answer questions for you. They're 100%. Not going to. Sometimes we want other people to be like, can you just make the decision? Can you just tell me? And actually, that's not the point of a mentor. A mentor will guide you and just support you along the way, but not do the work, not to make the hard decision for you.
Yeah, and I'd say even guide for what they did, and how I try to mentor some of the individuals that have come to me is probably even a bit of a strong word there. I ask questions, and some of them are leading questions, some are open-ended questions, but I try to understand where their mind's at on what they're struggling with in a certain issue, and then have them answer it themselves. Because I think that was probably some of the best advice given to me, was instead of seeking answers from individuals, have them ask you the questions that makes your mind tick to find the answer yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the key to when I moved from being a manager into the director role, and when I started to actually have direct reports, my mentor that I had said, you're asking closed questions where they can only answer yes or no. If you're asking open-ended questions, they can come up with the answer themselves. And actually, to the problem they came to you with, they've actually answered it themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very key, isn't it, to get someone how to think about and work something out for themselves, essentially. But they probably know the answer.
And it translates to clients as well. So like I said, when we go in and pitch work to clients or have meetings with clients, I very rarely am saying you can benefit from this and we can do this for you and we can do that. It's, where are your pain points today? What are you struggling with? How do you tackle that? What are you thinking there? And you can kind of see their minds start to work to be like, do we need assistance? Or if they're saying, no, we're good and that's clean. I haven't gone in and tried to brute force a service that they don't need. Yeah. And if they talk about things, they say, wow, you know what, we probably do need a bit of help there, rather than us going in and trying to pitch sales and work. It's find your answer on your own and where you need help, guidance, assistance. Yeah,
absolutely. The art of selling is you shouldn't even have to sell. It should just be a conversation, shouldn't
100%. I am a firm believer in that. And in the interview process, I told everyone I interviewed this, I said, look, I'm a terrible salesman.
Yeah, you said this to me as well, actually.
If you were the sell your pen trick or the a used car salesman, I would just be horrific at it. But I do think I'm great at asking good questions, challenging questions, inquisitive questions that make the individual think about where they're at and where they want to be and whether or not there's a gap to fill there.
Absolutely. Matt, Gen Z, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that they have at times a bit of an unfair stigma about them, right? And the market, I'll say at times, again, this isn't my personal take on it, but they can say, that there's a big focus on work-life balance and they log off at 5 and get in at 9, and there's no loyalty to the firms that they're working with. Yeah. I would say I've got two kind of thoughts and arguments against that. One is, I think we can all agree as a society, we've grown so much over the past 200 years from the way that we think and the way that we act and laws and what's gone in and what's been taken out, right? Yeah. This is a forward-thinking generation, and the focus has been placed on mental health and well-being and work-life balance. And I think that's really important. I grew up in between kind of a millennial-ish generation, but my parents instilled hard work in me, right? I was working from the age of 12 every year until now when I'm 34 now. So I've worked every summer. It was always, if the company needs anything extra, you stick around and you do it, right? So I understand that mindset, but I've also grown up with the Gen Z generation kind of as staff and managers. And I can see how much I've gained from them saying, Matt, take a step back. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday. We're not going to achieve anything else today. Let's take off and grab some dinner, right? Yeah. And that mindset I may have never had kind of starting early in my career. And I think the second point is Gen Z are the future leaders of tomorrow, right? So regardless of if us as different generations approve of their way of working or their way of thinking or what it is, it's our responsibility to adapt to it and to, meet in the middle somewhere where, especially in consulting, 70-hour work weeks and, late nights and papers and taking, I don't want to say abuse, but very tough conversations from clients, it won't hold, and you won't maintain good people and good talent if you force them to work in a way of working that was, acceptable 20, 30 years ago. So
I love your view on that, because one, I think it's different. So out of all the conversations that I've had with so many business leaders, we've talked about Gen Z, we've talked about frustrations, and I know Gen Z, I know the Gen Z generation. I understand what their motivations are. Yes, they might be different from mine, but I really hear your point that they are creative, they think differently, and they're also teaching us to think in a different way. And that is so refreshing to hear. And I think that other business leaders need to hear what you're saying around that as well, because I think it's a really true point.
And imagine a startup entrepreneur, a 25-year-old CEO that is a Gen Zer and thinks in a Gen Z way. If you're in consulting and you think about things in a way that worked 20, 30 years ago, or in a millennial way of working, you're never going to connect with that CEO. You're never going to win work with them, because they're going to see it and say, you're not going to attack this the way that we want to problem solve. And that is more and more coming down the line. And I think if especially in professional services, if you don't adapt to leadership styles and ways of thinking and what success is in society today, you're never going to be able to deliver a service that's, acceptable and in line with what they need.
Can I pick your brains on that a little bit further?
Yeah.
So you've got CEOs or CFOs, you've got Gen Z on the other side. Whose responsibility is it to bring that together?
It's everyone's.
Who does it fall on?
Everyone's responsibility, right? So if you're the CFO and let's say you're the CFO of a big four professional services firm, you're hiring direct out of university, right? You're hiring everyone in from Gen Z. If you don't want them to come in, get ACA qualified, and leave your organization after they get those 2-3 years experience and a qualification, you need to make the environment something that is motivational to them, something that aligns to their values and where they want to be. So, it's all the way up to the tone at the top, and that needs to make its way down through the way engagements are managed and people are managed. If you're Gen Z and you're going into professional services, you need to understand that there might be greater expectations on hours, like investment banking, years ago. So there's certain industries where if you go into it, you're not going to have the same career path and work-life balance as someone who works at a surf shop on the coast somewhere that works 9 to 5 and then takes off into the ocean, right? So, but there's no singular responsibility, and managers, senior managers, all the way down the board need to understand that we need to adapt, come together, because to the point we talked about earlier on D&I, you're not going to be a firm that is fully diverse and inclusive if you're excluding a full generation.
Yeah, absolutely. I have nothing more to add. I have no questions. You have put that so nicely. And I think that's, every business needs to hear that. So thank you for your views on that.
Absolutely.
Greatly appreciate. You've been an absolute pleasure to have on here. I can't wait for people to hear about who CFGI are. You've definitely come on my radar. So that's a good thing in itself.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you.
It's been
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks.